Welcome. Today's explainer dives straight into a major cultural shift. We're looking at how modern young adult fiction is basically giving youth a roadmap to process real-world trauma. Specifically, we're zeroing in on the themes of police brutality and systemic racism. And to do that, we're using two absolutely incredible novels as our guides today. Angie Thomas's acclaimed The Hate U Give and J. Coles's Tyler Johnson Was Here. So let's just jump right in, shall we? Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with how real tragedies spark YA fiction, then look closely at The Hate U Give and Tyler Johnson Was Here, discuss the pushback in book bans, and finally wrap up with intersectionality in YA literature. All right, Section 1. Real tragedies spark YA fiction from the news to the page. To really understand this macro movement in literature, we have to look at the news cycle. The tragic, real-world killings of Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, and so many others sparked a massive cultural shift. These events left a profound mark on society. Authors basically started turning to the page to help younger generations navigate the intense grief and fear they were seeing all over their screens. Take author Angie Thomas, for example. She actually started the concept for The Hate U Give as a short story for her senior college project. She was deeply, deeply shaken by the 2009 police shooting of Oscar Grant in Oakland. Thomas noted that, even though she didn't know him personally, she took his death personally. She literally transformed her own grief and her need to help her classmates understand into this incredibly powerful narrative for young readers. And the very title of the book, it carries so much weight. Thomas actually found inspiration in an old YouTube clip of the legendary rapper Tupac Shakur talking about his thug life tattoo. He explained it as an acronym. It stands for The Hate U Give Little Infants Fucks Everybody. Thomas realized, wow, his words perfectly describe the systemic anger we see in society today. What society gives to its youth inevitably bites back. It was just the absolute perfect thematic anchor for her story. Moving on to Section 2, The Hate U Give, and Starr Carter's Two Worlds. Let's introduce our protagonist. She's a 16-year-old girl named Starr Carter. And man, the intense duality of her everyday life is really something we need to unpack.
Starr basically lives in two deeply divided, totally contrasting realities. On one side, she's got Garden Heights, that's the poor, predominantly black neighborhood where she grew up, and on the exact opposite side, she has Williamson Prep. That's this affluent, mostly white private school across town. Just bridging the immense economic and racial chasm between these two spaces puts an unbelievable amount of psychological pressure on a teenager. So to survive these two totally different environments, Starr has to constantly code switch. And what that means is she changes her slang, her behavior, even her presentation, depending on which world she's standing in at that moment. At Williamson, she absolutely doesn't talk about Garden Heights, and at Garden Heights, she definitely doesn't bring up Williamson. It creates this fractured identity, literally two different versions of herself, and this is all before the main tragedy of the novel even strikes.
And then we hit the heartbreaking inciting incident that completely shatters that careful balancing act she's got going. Driving home from a party, Starr and her childhood friend Khalil get pulled over. Within minutes, Khalil, who is completely unarmed, is fatally shot by a white police officer, and Starr is the sole witness. Suddenly, her two worlds just violently collide. The media starts painting Khalil as a thug, and Starr is faced with this agonizing choice. Does she stay silent to protect her Williamson Prep identity and her own safety, or does she risk absolutely everything to speak the truth about who her friend really was? Okay, let's shift gears to Section 3, Tyler Johnson Was Here in a Parallel Quest for Justice. We're bringing in J. Coles's novel here to really broaden our understanding of how YA fiction is tackling this heavy, heavy subject matter. When you look at the journeys of these two protagonists side by side, it's a super fascinating comparison. While Starr personally witnesses her friend's death and really wrestles with the idea of testifying to a grand jury, Marvin's experience in Coles's novel is quite different. Marvin barely survives a violent police raid at a party, only to find out days later that his brother Tyler was killed. And how does he find out? A video of the police shooting goes viral online. Just imagine the sheer psychological toll of discovering your own brother's murder through a trending social media clip, completely surrounded by strangers' comments. Both of these kids have to navigate profound grief and the sudden, harsh glare of the media spotlight, but from very different vantage points. But when we put these novels side by side, this really powerful shared blueprint emerges.
Both of these authors brilliantly use the YA format to reflect exactly what teenagers are already seeing on their smartphones. I mean, they both tackle police violence, systemic racism, and the viral media machine that so often criminalizes victims. Most importantly, they center on young protagonists struggling to find their self-identity and, just a sense of peace amid immense tragedy. Think about it for a second. These authors are giving teens a framework to process the very things that are dominating their social media feeds every single day.
That brings us to Section 4, the pushback and book bans, and exactly why these books are challenged. Because these novels tackle such raw, real-world issues, they've received a ton of attention, both positive and, well, negative. So let's take a neutral look at the public's reaction to this literature. Critics actually cite very specific reasons that land The Hate U Give consistently on the American Library Association's top banned books list. For instance, back in 2018, a South Carolina police union challenged the book's inclusion on a summer reading list, basically calling it an indoctrination of distrust toward police. Other really common criticisms point to the inclusion of profanity, drug references, depictions of violence, and claims that the content promotes divisiveness or is just generally age-inappropriate for teenagers. Now, to counterbalance that, let's look at the perspective from the Nashville Public Library's Banned Books Club. Library advocates argue that shielding teens from this literature actually leaves them unequipped to process reality. They counter that the book isn't anti-police, but rather anti-police violence. They point out that Starr's own uncle is a police officer. They argue that teens are already seeing violent news footage on their phones anyway, and avoiding these topics doesn't solve racism. As the library so powerfully notes, discomfort isn't divisiveness, it's education. Finally, let's dive into Section 5, Intersectionality in YA Literature, a critical social analysis. We're going to peel back the deep academic layers of this literature to understand exactly why these young adult books are now being studied at the university level. To do this, we really need to understand intersectionality. This is a framework developed by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. Basically, it explains how different aspects of a person's identity, things like race, gender, and class, they don't exist in a vacuum. They combine and overlap to create totally unique modes of discrimination and privilege. So Starr's journey isn't just about one single issue. It's about a highly complex web of overlapping identities. Look at this academic paper published in the Indiana Journal of Humanities and Social Sciences. Scholars like Dr. Raid Nafa Farhan are analyzing Starr's character through a multidimensional lens. This entirely elevates the text. It takes it from just a simple teen novel and turns it into a vital, complex piece of critical social analysis. Let's break down what academics call the matrix of domination in Starr's life. It's essentially built on three overlapping pillars. First up, feminism. Starr's journey from silence to finally speaking out is a reclamation of her voice as a young Black woman. Second, race. She's actively navigating systemic state violence and some highly biased media narratives. And third, class. She's constantly bridging the massive economic chasm between the poverty of Garden Heights and the immense privilege of Williamson Prep. The main academic takeaway here is that her poverty and privilege interact equally with her race and gender. Understanding this matrix helps us see that these aren't just fictional characters. They are realistic, layered reflections of very complex societal hurdles. So, what's the ultimate takeaway from all of this? Novels like The Hate U Give and Tyler Johnson Was Here actually serve as cultural pedagogy. They don't just recount trauma. They teach young readers how to process the systemic silencing and violence they see in the real world, and more importantly, how to transform that pain into powerful vocal activism. I want to end this explainer with a provocative question for you to chew on. When we look at the world teenagers are inheriting today, are we giving them the literature that prepares them to actually create change? Or, by shielding them, are we just leaving them confused, angry, and totally alone with their fear? The debate over YA fiction isn't just about books, folks. It's about how we equip the next generation for the reality they actually live in. Thank you so much for joining me today. And hey, keep questioning what you read.